Jai Nitalila Vishnu Mishtapada Tavange Sila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Nitalila Vishnu Mishtapada Tavange Sila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananda Gaudiya Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Sri Rup Sanatana Bhatragana Sri Jeev Gopala Das Ragana Sadgoswami Prabhu Ki Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Prem Se Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopi Go Shama Kun Radha Kun Giri Govardhani Ki Brajabhumi Vrindavan Dham Ki Sri Navadip Mayapur Dham Ki Sri Sri Krishna Balarama Ki Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Avirbhav Maha Mahotsav Ki Vyas Puja Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura Ki Jai Gau Premanande. All glories to the Asamudabhari. All glories to the Asamudabhari. All glories to the Asamudabhari. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Glories to you, Srila Prabhupada.
You can speak as long as you like.
No, I'm anxious to hear Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. So, on such a auspicious occasion, we're all gathered here. I believe it's 148th Vyas Puja ceremony of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. I saw that somewhere, I think. 148. So, although for such a elevated, renounced, and incredibly remarkable personality, it's totally improper for someone who's totally fallen, born in a meat-eater family, and completely a useless personality, totally unfitting, but somehow the Vaishnavas have asked me to speak something about the life of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura on this holy occasion. So I beg for the mercy of the Vaishnavas to be able to say something in glorification of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura, Srila Prabhupada. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chaksurun Militam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namah Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sthapitam Jena Bhutale Sayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swaparam Digam Aradhanastrinandan Thairidam Yache Puna Puna Srimad Rupa Padamujo Dulisham Janma Janmani Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatrubhyascha Kripasindhubheva Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. So today is the most holy appearance day of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura, 148th appearance day. So in our Gaudiya Sampradaya, we always celebrate the appearance day as Vyas Puja. Because the spiritual master is the representative of Vyas. Just like a train runs on two rails. If one rail is missing, our train will derail. Catastrophe. The same way, the spiritual master and Shastra, these are the two rails. If a spiritual master deviates from Shastra, then our train back to Godhead will derail. Huge calamity. So the spiritual master, he's the representative of Vyas. And I wish I had brought that poem with me that Srila Prabhupada wrote. Very beautiful poem, and Bhaktisiddhanta liked it. He says, absolute is sentient, thou hast proved. People are saying that he has no hands, no feet, no face, no form. This is an offense to the Lord. Absolute is sentient, thou hast proved. Impersonal calamity thou hast moved. Bhaktisiddhanta dedicated his whole life to destroying this impersonal view of the absolute truth. So this is a huge calamity. If we miss this opportunity to serve the lotus feet of the Lord, then our whole life becomes totally useless. This is a huge calamity. So as we'll see, our Param Guru Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura studied every philosophy to prove beyond any doubt that the philosophy propounded by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the most correct Siddhanta. So he's Bhaktisiddhanta. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura. And on the occasion of his 148th Vyas Puja ceremony, there's a place in Calcutta where he formed, I believe it was his first Gaudiya Math, on Ultadanga Road. And somehow with great trouble, because actually it was government land, but somehow our devotees in Calcutta were able to get that land and renovate. It was completely in dilapidated condition. They've renovated this place. And on this holy day, as soon as this meeting is over, you can go to the Facebook page of ISKCON Calcutta or their YouTube page and you can watch. Because even the Chief Minister of Bengal, Mamta, I couldn't remember her first name, Mamta Banerjee, she's also going to be there, so the police are not allowing hardly anyone to be there, so we're with everyone else. We can watch online and see the inauguration of this most auspicious place where our Prabhupada met Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada and got the order to preach in the Western world in the English language. Most incredible event happened here that changed the whole course of the world. Now, I heard somebody from another sampradaya who worships Lord Vishnu as being supreme, Narayan. They were lamenting that somehow this Bhakti-Vedanta Swami, he has illusioned the whole world that everyone thinks Krishna now is the Supreme Personality of Godhead all over the world. So that momentous occasion started, I believe it was 1922. Prabhupada was dragged there to this place. So now ISKCON has managed to get this place very beautifully. We saw the trailer of the event that very beautifully have renovated this place, put a beautiful canopy over the actual spot on the roof where Srila Prabhupada met Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura. And this place is not only important to us, it's also important to the Gaudiya Math devotees. So this is where we can all join together. After all, we're all in Lord Chaitanya's family. we can all come together and honor this great personality in this place. So Calcutta's Facebook page or YouTube channel, you can watch this wonderful event online. So, unfortunately, by the time Bhaktivinoda appeared on the scene, we've been hearing about just recently Lord Nityananda's appearance and the great appearance of Narottam Das Thakur. But shortly after that, the real message of Lord Chaitanya was completely covered over. People invented so many upasampradayas and so many practices that people no longer had any respect for Gaudiya Sampradaya, just an excuse to beg and fill your belly or to engage in nefarious activities in the name of religion. Just like our dear God brother Smarhari told the other day, he told some life member in South, "Where's your guru from?" And he said, "Bengal." And immediately that life member just ignored him. Because they knew these were all bogus people. So even now, or even then, that was 20, 30 years ago, because I think opinions have changed by now. But people had no respect. And Bhaktivinoda somehow or other managed to catch on to the real thread of Mahaprabhu's teachings and understand the beauty of Mahaprabhu's philosophy. And he was lamenting that so many upasampadayas were there, that the Mayavadis were gaining the upper hand. And just like at Vaitacharya, we had the appearance of Vaitacharya just recently. He was also lamenting that even he was the incarnation of Mahavishnu. He was unable to change things. Only if Lord himself comes. So he begged for Lord Chaitanya's appearance. So similarly, Bhaktivinoda Thakur at that time, he was posted as the magistrate of Puri. This was a very, very honored post. Practically all magistrates were British at that time, but the British appreciated, even the British appreciated the intelligence and qualities of Bhaktivinoda Thakur that they made him magistrate in Puri. And it's explained many malpractices were stopped by him, and he even caught the king pilfering money. So many things were there. So he also prayed that I cannot do this alone. Only if you send someone to help me. He needed a ray of Vishnu. So he was living right on, you've seen, many of course, not all of you, but many have seen, right on the Grand Road. Grand Road is where the Rath Yatra festival takes place. And just a little ways down, practically almost opposite of the king's palace, there's a very palatial building that Bhaktivinoda Thakur had taken on rent. On this day, 148 years ago, little Bimala Prasad, he called him Bimala Prasad. We know Bimala Devi. She's one of the Devis in the Jagannath temple, but actually, unless the bhog is, after the Mahaprasad is offered to Lord Jagannath, has to be offered to Bimala Devi, or is not considered Mahaprasad. It's a very important Devi. So, little Bimala Prasad appeared. And we can see just a few months later, Rath Yatra festival was there. And somehow or other, although it only takes a few hours, somehow the cart stopped in front of Bhaktivinoda's house for 3 days. They were unable to move the carts. His Lord loved his devotee Bhaktivinoda so much He stayed there for 3 days. And Bhaktivinoda, since he was a magistrate, he took advantage and he told his wife, you take the child on the cart. Nobody could stop her. She was the she was the magistrate's wife. So when she placed the child in front of Jagannath, immediately reached toward Jagannath's feet. Little children, they reached like this. And Lord Jagannath's garland immediately fell. Oh, we forgot one thing. When Bimala Prasad was born, his umbilical cord was wrapped around his body like a Brahman thread. And left a permanent mark on his body. So then when this garland fell down and encircled the child, Bhaktivinoda knew, this is the child that I was praying for. This is the child that I begged for. And then when he did the Annaprashan, the grain ceremony, immediately he went to the Bhagavatam. Bhaktivinoda was confirmed. This child will preach Lord Chaitanya's message. And then another interesting event happened when he was about 4 years old. Bhaktivinoda brought some mangoes home to be offered to the Lord. And little Bimal Prasad immediately grabbed one mango and ate it. And Bhaktivinoda said, you are a great offender. Whatever is brought in this house is meant for the service of the Lord. You have taken this mango before it is offered to the Lord. And from the age of 4 years old, he made a vow that he kept throughout his life. Even in his elderly age, he vowed, I'm a great offender, I shall never eat mango for the rest of my life. I will never eat mango for the rest of my life. And even in his old age, his disciples and well-wishers, they would bring mangoes. He said, no, I'm an offender. I cannot take. By the age of 7, he had memorized all 700 sloks of Bhagavad-Gita. I'm 72, I can't make that claim. But at the age of 7, he had memorized every slok of Bhagavad-Gita and could not only recite them, but also tell the meaning according to Vaishnava Siddhant, Gaudiya Vaishnava Siddhant. The age of 7. And he began his schooling. He was adept in all subjects. And somehow he was attracted to astrology. And later in his schooling, he began to study this. In fact, he saw that most astrologers, especially in Bengal, and probably the rest of India, they were leaning toward the Western style of astrology. And he felt very bad about this. So he took one book, 2 books, Surya Siddhanta and Siddhanta Ceremony, something like that. And he translated them, and he noted in the verses itself, it said that these formulas that are mentioned there have to be revised at least every 100 years. Just like we say there's 24 hours in a day, but actually there's not 24 hours in a day. We say there's 30 days in a month, actually it's like 29 and quarter or something like that. So in Western, every 4th year we have a leap year. 1 extra day is there. So everything doesn't go exactly. So every 100 years or so you have to adjust everything. Just like you see sometimes our Ekadasi and the Smarta Brahmana Ekadasi, they don't match. Because our devotees have taken all the formulas and revised them according to the actual situation. And even those people who make the orthodox panchakas, even they, when there's solar eclipse or moon eclipse, they take the Western scientists' calculations. Because a titi nobody can see. We have no idea when one titi begins, when nobody can see that. But eclipse, you can see very clearly the eclipse is happening at such a time. If according to their calculations, they're saying that happens at another time, everyone will doubt them. So they take the material scientists' calculations for these things. So everything has to be adjusted every once in a while. And he preached very vigorously throughout his life. Not throughout his life, excuse me. In his beginning life. Later he left astrology, we'll hear about that. And eventually he, to fulfill Bhaktivinoda's deep desire, he established this Navadvip Panjika. Because ordinary Panjikas, they have so many different holidays, not necessarily followed by Vaishnavas. And then he named all of the months, just like Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura Prabhupada. He appeared, this is the 5th day of the dark half of the month of Phalgun. But you see in our Vaishnava calendar it says Govinda. So he renamed all the months according to the Vaishnava way of naming the months. So this is the month of Govinda, although everybody in India thinks it is Phalgun, the very month that our Lord deigned to make his appearance. He also, Bhaktisiddhanta also appeared in that same month. And he had great thirst for learning. He would, whatever books he would get a hold of, not only would he read them, he would remember them. It said that even 50 years later, after reading some book, he could quote verbatim from that book. He could quote verbatim. It's a great thirst for knowledge. And one of his last exploits in the field of astrology was there was one, Bapudev Shastri, something like that. He was a very famous astrologer, but he was leading everyone away from the Vedic tradition to the Western tradition. And Bhaktisiddhanta was preaching very heavily against this. So finally there was a debate arranged, and Bhaktisiddhanta spoke with such clarity and such force and such proof that it said that poor Bapudev Shastri, he passed stool and urine in his dhoti. He was defeated, so embarrassed by the arguments of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. After this he left all of that. At a young age, he helped his father, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, establish the Bhakti Bhavan. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur insisted that he begin chanting the Hare Krishna mantra and gave him beads. And he kept those beads throughout his life. I'm very sorry somehow those beads that Prabhupada chanted on, I left them in Colombia, South America somewhere. But he kept the beads that Bhaktivinoda Thakur gave him. When they were digging the foundations, and they gave him some Nishringa mantra. He also initiated him to some Nishringa mantra. And when they dug the foundations for Bhakti Bhavan, they found one Kurma Shila. And Bhaktivinoda gave him a special mantra for Kurma also. And he built this Bhakti Bhavan. He began to take up helping his father in this mission to show the glory of the Gaudiya Vaishnava Siddhanta. And of course we know later Bhaktivinoda insisted that he take initiation from Srila Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj. And we know that Babaji Maharaj, he could not even write his name. He was unable to write his name, which those days, 100 years, 150 years ago, that was not a strange thing in India. Now, of course, it's quite strange thing. Many people were totally illiterate. But although we always hear about Gaura Das Babaji being very literate, when he would speak on Shastra, he would quote very clearly. Although he couldn't write his name, he could quote Shastra very clearly and defend his position. And defend the glory of the holy name. And Bhaktisiddhanta, he received all honors in school, and they honored him as a great astrologer. Everybody was amazed by his learning. Everyone was very impressed. And many so-called gurus, they wanted to get him for their disciple. This would be a big feather in their cap to have such a learned disciple. But he saw all the deficiencies in them and all their faults. He refused. He was a little bit shocked. His father told him, you must take initiation from Gaura Das Babaji Maharaj. And he went to Gaura Das Babaji Maharaj and he flatly refused. Everybody else would have been glad for getting him as a disciple. He said, no, I had one disciple, he cheated me and went away, I'm not going to initiate anyone throughout my life. And Bhaktisiddhanta writes, I was jolted by Prabhu. He used to call Gaura Das Babaji his Prabhu. My Prabhu showed me the worthlessness of all my learning and education. I was very proud that I was very moral, I was very ethical, I was very learned, I knew so many things, I was very proud of all my things, but they were dust in front of my Prabhu. I was jolted out of my false ego. That was his mercy, that he jolted me like that. They understood everything I had was totally worthless without Krishna Bhakti. And Krishna Bhakti was beyond all these so-called things. I was jolted. And again, I begged and pleaded with him. He said, I will ask Mahaprabhu. If he gives the order, I will initiate you. So I would ask him again and again, did you get the order? Oh, I forgot. Finally, I asked him, he said, I asked him, but I didn't receive any order yet. Finally, Bhaktisiddhanta, or Bimal Prasad, he said, he told him, if you don't initiate me, Kandiya Kandiya Pranana Rakibo Ara. We know this famous song, Gurudev Kripa Bindudiya. That crying and crying, if I don't get your mercy, then crying and crying, Pranana Rakibo Ara. I will not remain alive. Bhaktisiddhanta was ready to die without the mercy of his spiritual master. So so Babaji Maharaj said, look, all right, you go to the Jalangi, take bath, and then I'll initiate you. And so he gave him not even some japamala, just some knotted pieces of cloth. He was totally renounced. He had a tiger skin cap, he gave him the tiger skin cap and some knotted pieces of cloth. Something else they gave him, I can't think of right now. You can remember 700 slokas of Bhagavad. I can't even remember things I read just yesterday. But he accepted these as a great treasure from the hands of his spiritual master. And he received initiation finally from Gaura Das Babaji Maharaj, who had finally come. He had lived for 36 years in Braj, and then he finally came to stay in Navadvip. And somehow Gaura, he loved Bhakti-Vinod Thakur. Though he was supposedly a big worldly type of person, magistrate and so many other posts he had, engaged in government service, but he would come and stay with Bhakti-Vinod at Swananda Sukhara Kunj in Godrumji. And Gaura told him 3 things. He said, don't accept any disciples, don't keep association with anyone, and don't go to the material world, Calcutta. And Bhaktisiddhanta said, I kept all those 3. Because I accept that these are not my disciples, they're all my gurus. By their enthusiasm to chant Harinam, I'm becoming encouraged. They're all my gurus. I don't associate with anyone and everyone, only with Vaishnavas. So I kept his second instruction. And then wherever Harinam is going on, that is Vrindavan. So I do not go to Calcutta. Wherever I go, that is also Vrindavan. So he kept all the 3 orders of Gaura. And we know Gaura, finally he was living in a latrine. And Bhaktivinoda had instructed Bhaktisiddhanta that you go to Mayapur, because he had established a temple at Yogapeeth, but things were going out of, because that time was very remote, hardly anybody went there. Very difficult for anyone to stay there, because we know it plays. So Bhaktisiddhanta went there and he began to manage, and some young fellow came, who at that time was sincerely searching for the truth, and he saw Bhaktisiddhanta engaged in so much management. This is a bogus guy. So he decided to associate with Bhaktisiddhanta's guru. He said, this guy is real. So, but gradually, he became puffed up in association with, although he was in association with such a wonderful person, he began to control Gaura life. And people gave so many things. And Gaura, he ate very simply, hardly ate anything. But this fellow, Mitra, his name, he was keeping all those things and eating them for himself. So naturally, if you eat very rich foods, then you'll become agitated. So nighttime he was doing all types of nefarious activities. And he became so puffed up that whenever Bhaktisiddhanta would come, he would close the door. But Gaura, he'd hear the voice of Bhaktisiddhanta, he would come outside. One time he came outside and he began to narrate all the nefarious activities of Mitra. Mitra was shocked. And Gaura looked at him and said, you go home, get yourself married and live peacefully in Krishna consciousness. Don't make this show. So this was a great shame. He did. He went home, he got home, we got married and tried his best to live spiritual life. But Gaura was always troubled by these types of people who wanted to make a show of devotional service. And some point along the line, Bhaktisiddhanta decided he was going to chant 1 billion names. 1 billion names. Took him 9 years and 4 months, something like that. He made a place near the Yogapeeth, little hut, and he would stay there and chant, and chant, and chant. Still, sometimes he went out. Even though he was during his Nam Brat, just like one time, the Jata Gosai, the caste Goswamis, those who believe that only by seminal succession can one become Brahman or a Guru. And Bhaktisiddhanta had been born in a Datta family. This is, I believe, Kayasta or something like that. Just like Narottam Das Thakur, Shamananda. So the caste Goswamis and Smarta Brahmins, they were very against him. And they began preaching against him like anything. Finally, they organized a meeting and they declared it boldly that this guy is bogus fellow. All these, The Narottam Das Thakur, all these people, they're bogus. They've broken the Shastra. So, because during his travels, Bhima Prasad, he also came to Vrindavan. He stayed in Radharaman Gera, where Radharaman temple is. Gera is where all the Goswamis from Radharaman temple lived. And especially he was honored by Madhusudan Goswami, who is one of the forefathers of our Padmanabh Goswami. Padmanabh was found in his father's books, all about Bhima Prasad coming to visit, Bhaktivinoda Thakur coming to visit them, and so many connections are there between these Radharaman Goswamis and Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Bhima Prasad. Madan Goswami and Visvambar Devananda Goswami from Shamananda, because Shamananda also born in Kayastha. So they made a opposing meeting to present the opposing view. And they invited Bhaktivinoda Thakur, but Bhaktivinoda Thakur, under the excuse of extreme rheumatism, he could hardly move, he had to decline. And Bhaktivinoda cried, "Is there no one who can go?" And Bhaktisiddhanta wrote a dissertation, Brahman or Vaishnava. And when he read it to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, although Bhaktivinoda Thakur was practically paralyzed with his rheumatism, he got up and said, "Yes, yes, yes, Haribo, Haribo, Haribo." So Bhaktisiddhanta came to the meeting. He was one of the youngest people. So since he was very young, because people were surprised that despite being so young, he was so intelligent. Even they wanted to give him, some university wanted to give him the post of heading the astrology department, which was unheard of, such a young person taking such a post. But he declined. By this time he was not interested in astrology. So much is described that Bhaktisiddhanta, whenever he traveled, he always consulted whether it was an astrological good time to travel or not. He always checked all these things. But deep involvement with astrology never kept after that. So he went to the meeting because he was the youngest. He was invited to speak first. So he gave so many verses from the Shastra glorifying the Brahmins. Even the smarter Brahmins, they also snuck into the meeting. They were also astonished. Even slokas that they didn't know about, he was quoting. And they all became very happy. Then he began to explain the real Siddhanta, that Brahman is not known by his birth, but by his learning. By his behavior. Krishna says in Bhagavad Guna karma, he doesn't say Janma karma, he says Guna karma. Just like the other day with the devotees from Bombay, we went to Dharmkund in Kamivan, where the Yaksha took place. And we all know the very famous question, Kim is Charjam, what is the most surprising thing? Because some of the questions were yes and no, some of them were fill in the blank, some of them were essay questions, some of them multiple choice. So the Yaksha asked Yudhishthira Maharaj, do we know a Brahmin by his birth, by his learning, or by his behavior? And Yudhishthira said, somebody may be born as a Brahmin, he may be doing work not according to Brahmin. Just like when I was a very young devotee, my first year of Krishna consciousness. In LA, we would go to Hollywood Boulevard and chant in front of diamond gyms because sidewalk was very wide. So we didn't block the sidewalk, the police were happy, we were happy, only Diamond Gyms was unhappy. I told this one time and Gargamuni said, yes, he threatened to kill me. So we don't want to describe in this holy place before our lordships what they serve in this restaurant. We can only say, Go Mata Ki! And distilled essence of rottenness. They take grapes or grains and make them rotten and distill out the essence of the rottenness, and they think it's very sophisticated to drink distilled essence of rottenness. So this was going on in this restaurant. Sometimes we would be there distributing our Back to Godheads, and some person from Bharat would come out, and we would try to give them a magazine. He says, no, I'm from Bharat. I'm Brahmin, see, I'm Brahmin. See, I'm Brahmin. I'm Brahmin. So maybe born Brahmin, but he's acting completely like less than Sudra. And learning, we've seen so many people become very puffed up by their learning. We've heard the story how Ramanuja smashed the court pundit who had put his guru in debt because his guru couldn't defeat him. So he grabbed a handful of sand. He said, okay, Panditji, how many grains of sand do I have in my hand? He said, what kind of stupid question is this? And the king said, but then he has to defeat it. He has to give the answer. And Ramanuja said, handful. Handful. So we become very puffed up sometimes by our knowledge. But Brahman is known by his behavior. B. With A, B, and C, multiple choice, the answer was B. So he proved that beyond a shadow of doubt. And all the other speakers, they spoke on behalf of Bhaktisiddhanta, glorifying the wonderful things that he said. The opposing party tried to speak, but all the arguments were ineffective in front of Bhaktisiddhanta, because Bhaktisiddhanta gave the final argument, completely smashed them, and everybody was just in ecstasy. Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. So much so that, of course, the police had come. They expected trouble, so a big police contingent was there. And everybody rushed forward to touch Bhaktisiddhanta's feet, although he never let people do that. So the police grabbed him, ducked his feet in a bucket of water, filled a few more buckets and buckets of water, and then splashed it over the crowd to pacify them. So even while he was doing his Nam Jagya, he would still come out and preach. He would still manage the Yoga Peeth. And one time the king of Kashim Bazaar invited him, but although he was very generous with his donations, he was a bit sentimental, so he was taken by all the Jata Gosais and everyone, and they only gave Bhaktisiddhanta 5 minutes to speak, and after he spoke for 5 minutes they all shouted and made him sit down. So Bhaktisiddhanta refused to eat anything. And one boy who later became his disciple, one of his Ananta Basudev, at that time he was known as Basu. He asked him, why you're not taking anything? He said, I'm unable to do any good for this person, so how can I've come here to speak about Krishna and deliver him from the well of material life, but he's not giving me opportunity, so I cannot do anything for him. Why should I take his food? And besides, his pujari, Lord does not accept just by birth, he accepts by devotion. So this is not prasad that he's offering. And Jata Gosai told the king, oh, he's not eating your food because you're from Tili community, whatever that is. So Bhaktisiddhanta, on the 4th day, he finally just left. And the king came to the station begging and pleading. He said, no, I haven't been able to do anything to deliver you from the deep dark well of material life or give you real Krishna consciousness. So how can I eat your food? And besides, your pujari is not a real devotee. So how can how can Krishna accept this prasad? The king was amazed. So anyway, so many things happened like that, and finally he finished his Nam Yagya, and he decided to establish his press. But that time there was a lot of tension between the British and the Indians, so to get permission to have a printing press in Mayapur, and besides, Mayapur at that time was a very remote place. Now, of course, we have optical cable internet and so many things in my room. But those days, it was a completely desolate place. And Bhaktivinoda had trained Bhaktisiddhanta even how to fix the machines. Not only gave him proofing and editing and printing and laying out and all these things, but he taught him how the machines run, how to understand what's wrong, how to fix it. Bhaktisiddhanta knew everything. So he rented a place in, I can't remember where, some upscale neighborhood. This was unheard of, a sadhu renting a place in an upscale neighborhood. But he got a house very cheap because it was 36 rupees a month. Now we think 36 rupees is nothing, but those days, even in Prabhupada's time, he said a ghee was one rupee for a kilo of ghee. Now it's like about 200 rupees or something. So 36 rupees is a lot of money. Well, there was less for that neighborhood because people considered it to be haunted. It's like one time Bhaktivinoda, because Bhaktisiddhanta loved to take Bhaktisiddhanta on his trips. And one night they came to some village, they invited to stay in some temple. They stayed there. In the morning the people said, "Where did you stay?" And they said, "In that place." They said, "Oh, there's a ghost there who throws bricks and everything at people and disturbs their rest." "Oh, he tried to disturb us, but I chanted holy name and he went away." And people were shocked. He said, "How can he be delivered?" He said, "Only when a pure devotee speaks Krishna Katha or chants the real name, he will be delivered." And after Bhaktivinoda left, that ghost was never seen again. They understood Bhaktivinoda and Bhaktisiddhanta, they're the real devotees of Krishna. So that ghost never bothered them there at that place. So he called it Bhagavad-Yantra. Yantra means machine, Bhagavad-Yantra. Anyway, I'm running out of time. There's so many wonderful pastimes of Bhaktisiddhanta's life. The most amazing was that somehow he established his first Gaudiya Math at Ultadanga Road, and Prabhupada's friends insisted that they come and see the sadhu. And Prabhupada knew all these sadhus. They come, my father invites them, they come take prasad, and then they go outside, smoke bidi, and so many things. They do Harinam after Harinam, they're all smoking bidis. At night, we won't talk about what they do. He said, "Oh, these guys are bogus." He said, "No, this is real one." No. So finally, by force, they dragged Abai to Ultadanga Road. They went up onto the roof. And Abai was just about to pay his obeisances. He hadn't even put his head down to the ground. And Bhaktivinoda said, "You're a young, educated man. You preach the message of Lord Chaitanya in the English language in the Western worlds." And Prabhupada stood up, because Prabhupada had never been defeated by anyone. He said, "We're a ruled people, dominated. Who will hear the message of Lord Chaitanya from us?" And everybody in India at that time would have agreed with him. Prabhupada was part of the Gandhi's movement. And Bhaktisiddhanta said, the message of Lord Chaitanya doesn't depend on any political party. It doesn't wait for this change or that political change or this temporary thing. The message of Lord Chaitanya is so important, it must be preached now. And Prabhupada was defeated. And he told his friends, the message of Mahaprabhu is in good hands. And later in Allahabad, he was initiated. We know Bhaktisiddhanta established so many Gaudiya Maths all over India. He tried to send some disciples to the West, to a certain extent. There's one German sannyasi, I can't remember his name just now. They published a book about he was preaching in Germany, a little bit, but nobody had success like Prabhupada. And that meeting was in Ultadanga Road on the roof, and today this place is being inaugurated by ISKCON, and we're very, very happy. So because 1 hour is gone, so we're very, very anxious to hear the glorification of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta by our very dear godbrother Vaisesika Prabhu, who's preaching so wonderfully in the West. Hare Krishna.
First we'll sing a song, if you'll agree.
to sing along. From Bhaktivinoda Thakur, one of the favorite songs of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura called Kali Kukur. Do you all know this song? I'll read you the translation and then we'll have it. Thank you so much. Huh? Okay. Anyway, we'll get the spirit of it. Translation. If you want to be rid of the influence of the dog-like personality of Kali, then just sing the glories of the beautiful son of Mother Sachinandana. He is the savior of the Kali Yuga, Kali Yuga Pavana, and he is Kali Bhoy Nashana, the destroyer of all fear caused by the age of coral. He maddens Sri Gadadhar with his name, Gadadhar Madana. He is the treasure of the life of Sri Nityananda Prabhu, Nityayar Pradhandan. And he is the most worshipful object of Sri Advaita Acharya, Advaita Prabhujita. He is affectionately named Nimai by his mother due to being born under a neem tree. And he has been named Vishwambar by his grandfather. He is the only Lord of Sri Srivas. When I say the name, then you can repeat it. Sri Srivas. You got to really repeat it though. Srinivas Ishvara. And he steals the hearts of all the assembled devotees. Bhakta Samuha Chittachora. Lord Chaitanya is the moon over Nadia, Nadia's Shashadar. The Lord of Sri Mayapur Dham, Mayapur Ishwar, and the divine propagator of his own name, Nam Pravartana Sura. He is the instructor of family men, Grihijana Shikshaka, and he is also the hero of those who are in the renounced order of life, Nyasi Kula Nayaka. He is the husband of the goddess of fortune, Madhava. And he is overflowing with the ecstatic moods and sentiments of Srimati Radharani. Radha Bhavapura. Lord Chaitanya is the corrector and purifier of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, Sarvabhauma Shodhana, and the deliverer of King Prataparudra Gajapati Tarana, the source of nourishment of Srila Ramananda Roy, Ramananda Poshana. And he is a great hero, Vira. He increases the ecstasy of Srila Rupa Goswami, Rupananda Vartana. He is the maintainer and protector of Srila Sanatan Goswami, Sanatan Palam. He gladdens Haridas Thakur, Haridas Modana. And he is very grave, Tira. Lord Chaitanya is the source of all the transcendental mellows of Raj Tam, Raj Ras Pavana. He is the destroyer of all mischievous and wicked men. He is the destroyer of all mischievous and wicked mentalities. Dushta Matashatana. And he dissolves the mundane lust of the deceitful, insincere souls by his causeless mercy. Kapati Vigatana Kama. He maintains and protects his pure Vaishnava devotees. Shuddha Bhakta Palana. And he chastises dry speculative knowledge, Suksha Jnana Tadana. He destroys pretentious and hypocritical devotion, Chala Bhakti Dushana. And he is a reservoir of pleasure, Rama. So for the pleasure of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura, we'll sing this song together. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Kali Kukur Kadan, Jari Chao He. Jari Chao Jari chao hai. Kali Yuga Pavana, Holy Boy Nashana, Shisha Chinandana Gao hai. Advaita Prabhujita Gaura. Nimani Vishambhar Srinivasishvar Bhakata Samojita Chora. Nadiya Shashada Maya Purishma Nam Pravardhana Sura. Grihijana Shiksha Kanyasikula Nayaka Madhava Radha Bhava Pura. Sarvabhauma Shodhana Gajapati Karana Ramana Poshana Veera. Banda Pardana Sanatana Parana Haridas Modana Veera. Vajraspadana Nishamadasha Tapati Vikasana Kama. Srila Bhakta Bhavana Shiksha Jnana Dharana Chala Bhakti Dushana Rama. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Deena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Namashristam Manamapi Sachiputramatra Sarupam Shri Rupam Tasyagrajam Urupirim Maturim Goshtavatim Radha Kundam Girivaramoho Radhika Madhavasham Prapto Yasya Pratita Kripaya Shri Gurun Tam Natosmi He Guru Jnanadatina Bandhu Swanandadata Kurunaika Sindhu Vrindavana Sinahita Prasida Radha Pranaya Prachara Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Namine Shri Vaishabana Videvi Daitaya Kripataye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Daine Pravave Namaha Madhurya Ujvala Premadya Shri Rupa Nuga Bhaktida Shri Gaura Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namostude Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dinatarne Rupa Nuga Virudhapa Siddhanta Dvantaharine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sari Gaura Bhaktivinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Gaura Premanande Hari Hari Om. Deena Bandhu Prabhu, thank you very much. I was feeling very deeply while you were speaking about how pleased Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura would be to have you sitting here speaking his glories. Although you said otherwise, that you were the most unqualified, but I've found you to be the most qualified in the sense that with his vision, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's compassionate nature led him to this vision that Krishna consciousness could be spread all over the world, and that the devotees from every part of the world would come together. What to speak of become elevated, great souls, which you have become, are, and have become. And Hari, sorry, but I'm just telling you the way it is. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. Deena Bandhu Prabhu Ki Jai. And of course, it's not so easy to think about how Krishna, it's easy to think about how Krishna consciousness might spread throughout the world and envelop the Western countries, Paschatya Deshatarine, which was, as Deena Bandhu Prabhu pointed out, the desire of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura, so much so that it was on the tip of his tongue when he saw somebody qualified in our Srila Prabhupada at Ultadanga Road. He walked up those steps, did our Srila Prabhupada, and said, offered obeisances to a saintly person, not knowing exactly who he was, but before he could sit up, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was already giving him the instruction to spread Krishna consciousness amongst the English-speaking people, go to the West. Means that that's what he was meditating on, because now when somebody he saw through his transcendental vision had qualification to do that, he immediately said it. It's the natural thing that we say, what we're thinking about all the time. When we meet people, that's what comes out in our conversation. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura was absorbed in thinking about how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement could spread all over the world. And that's why he said it immediately. And of course, saying it and having it happen are two different things. But that's where the exhilaration comes from in life for those who work hard for companies that sell cars. They get a little excited when they sell another car. But, of course, it's a futile profession ultimately in that, sorry to all the car dealers watching. Ultimately, it leads to naught. It's only a material facility. But for those who have the entrepreneurial spirit for Krishna consciousness, and they see Krishna consciousness entering within the hearts of people who were once dead, Asurya namate loka antena tamasabrita tamste bigachanti yeki chatma hanojana. The Shastra declares somebody who doesn't have Krishna consciousness to be dead. And how to bring a dead person alive? Well, that's the great secret that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura had. He knew how to do it, and he wanted to see it happen. And then he instilled that spirit in the heart of our Srila Prabhupada, who said that when he left that place that day, he was no longer the same. He had been surcharged with the bij, this idea to serve Lord Chaitanya's mission by spreading it all over the world. He didn't know how. He didn't know where it would take place, but he incubated that feeling in his heart by the mercy of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura. And this is the power of the parampara. We find in the Srimad Bhagavatam that the power of the devotees is given as the primary way in which the Lord Vishnu's mercy is spread all over the world. In fact, the verse that most epitomizes our Krishna consciousness movement is given by Shukadeva Goswami when he says, Kirata hunanda pulinda pulkasha abhira shumbha yavana kasadaya yene cha papa yadapashaya shreya shudyanti tasmai Prabhu Vishnave namaha. He names all the people who are grossly unqualified for human society, as defined by varnashrama and acting civilized ways. However, there's long lists of people outside of that context that Shukadeva Goswami mentions. Kirata, Hunanda, Pulinda, that's a list of people who don't have any idea about the goal of life or how to conduct oneself, even so that one doesn't go into the lower regions of the universe. And then he says, however, all of these people can become exalted souls. They can be delivered by the power of Lord Vishnu coming through the Vaishnavas. And we find in the Bhagavatam also Swayambhur Narada Shambhu Kapilo Manu, that the list of all our Mahajans. These are devotees of the Lord whose vow has qualified them to be an example for the rest of the people in the world. And by their strong adherence to Krishna consciousness in this vow, then that gives them power to give it to other people. So it's a magical occurrence that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura spoke those words to Srila Prabhupada, our Srila Prabhupada, and then he felt it in his heart. And then gradually, just as when you water a seed, you see some magic. A seed looks insignificant. It's tiny, almost not almost, it's dried up and compact, but if you put it in the right place and put water and some sunshine and air, then it sprouts and it then turns into a tree. And that's what happened from the words of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura, whose heart, mind, soul, everything was fixed in serving the Guru Parampara and passing it on to others. So, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura had principles that we're following today, that were imbibed by our Srila Prabhupada and passed on to us in systematic ways. There are several, but I'll just name three, unless several means three, but I think it means more than three, so I think I'm safe to name just a few that are prominent, and then we can discuss them, because these principles come from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura, or he amplified them. They come from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the Goswamis, but they're amplified by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura. And of course, all of the gurus, Bhaktivinoda Thakur as well. So one of them is a Yukta Vairagya. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura was an exemplar of Yukta Vairagya, which is, of course, mentioned by the Goswamis in their literatures. Anasaktasya vishayan yatarham upayunjita nirbandha krishna sambandhe yuktam vairagya muchyate prapanchikataya buddhya hari sambandhi vasuna mumukshavi pratyagyo vairagyam palgukhatyate, which means this gives a guidance of how we can conduct ourselves in a material world. We're spiritual souls living here. How can we walk the path that is perfect, even though we're ensconced in material energy? Some choose to renounce the world, and this is ludicrous, as is pointed out many times by Prabhupada, that if you walk into an assembly and then you decide to renounce it and say, I renounce this assembly, or I renounce this Bank of America, he gave that example. It's a laughable statement, because you never owned it in the first place. And if you try to enjoy it, then every poet or songwriter in history has written at least once a song about the reversals of fortune that take place when you try to enjoy this world, right? Are you thinking of one right now? Going through your head? How everything was lost, or how it wasn't what I expected? So what is the path? It's the path of Yukta Vairagya, as given by Srila Prabhupada in a brilliant, as are all his sentence within one of his purports, where he says that a devotee is one who sees the entire world, the entire universe, as paraphernalia to be used in Krishna's service. The entire universe is paraphernalia to be used in Krishna's service. And this is the principle coming down from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu through the pen of Rupa Goswami, and then it was made practical by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura, that, for example, he noticed, as Deena Bandhu Prabhu had mentioned, that the Gaudiya Sampradaya had fallen into ill repute. People didn't respect the devotees in this Sampradaya because it had become degraded. They had become degraded. And in order to distinguish his Gaudiya Mat from just the imitators of the Goswamis, he made some changes. One of his principles was, we should look better than they do. just in dress, like there's a few devotees I've seen here, always look really nice. He made sure that his devotees going out into the world looked better than everybody else. Nicer clothes, they had accoutrements. In fact, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura had used fancy cars that they could drive in, going from place to place. He himself brought some of his disciples even to Radhakund, dressed up in very, you can see pictures of it, modern, first-class tailoring. Tailored shirts, which was never done before because of a proscription from wearing sewn cloth. But he winnowed out those aspects that are insignificant and emphasized what would expand the interest of people all over the world in and repair the image of the Gaudiya Sampradaya, Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya. So he utilized anything and everything that could be used in the service of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And we see that in the way that our Srila Prabhupada mentioned many times. For instance, we use all technology. Tape recorder. So generally people think a sadhu would not touch technology, stay out in wild areas, maybe live in a cave. But following the spirit of Prahlad Maharaj, who said, I don't want to live in a cave. I'm going into the city. In fact, I'm going to find the most crowded city there is in the world, and that's where I'm going to live. And that was the mood of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura. And there we would have, he said, access to people who could take to Krishna consciousness. So much so that he put on events where he would invite kings, he would invite politicians, and he would accommodate whatever dietary preferences they had. In fact, even serving meat in some places. It's known, written in the Sri Bhaktisiddhanta Vaibhav, well-researched book by His Holiness Bhakti Vikas Swami, that some people were accommodated so they would come and listen to Krishna Katha. One man was a smoker, so he made sure that he had cigarettes available to him. That reminded me, sometimes when we're on book distribution, this has happened more than 2 or 3 times. Somebody's holding something like a cigarette. In fact, this happened recently within the last 4 years. I was talking to someone and they had a cigarette, and in order to purchase the book, they had to do something with the cigarette, and it looked like it could derail the process. So I said, here, I'll hold it. It was a lit cigarette, you know, burning. So when the other devotees saw me holding a cigarette, but I was thinking Srila Bhaktisiddhanta would have done this. If other people look at me and say, like, what'd you hold the cigarette for? It's like, go talk to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura. He deliberately went out of his way to make arrangements so that everybody could come in under the tent of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he had full faith that once they did, they would probably never come back out again after they started hearing Krishna Katha, hearing the Kirtan, and getting association of devotees. And we see that's how Prabhupada, of course, strict on principle, but very liberal in applying the practice so that it would attract people to come to Krishna consciousness. This is one of the hallmark or the signature principles of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura. He changed, he revolutionized the spreading of Krishna consciousness by liberalizing, by employing everything, going out of his way to make sure that our Sampradaya, as representatives, were front and center in the world, and that would accommodate people's sensitivities, and they would be able to take to Krishna consciousness. Do you agree that that's one of the principles, the Yukta Vairagya, that marks the campaign of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura?
Yes.
Okay. Would you like to comment on why you feel that way? Whoever said yes? We have an extra mic here. You all don't mind fasting, right? Say no, we don't mind. Thank you. Some of you said yes, you agree. Maharaj?
So we use everything for Krishna's service. We have cars, we have nice temples. So as long as we're using, we know that the ultimate proprietor is Krishna, and we don't use him for our sense enjoyment, and that is Yukta Vairagya. We're following in the footsteps of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura.
Thank you, Margaret. I think there was an important clause that you included in your statement, and that we don't use it for our own enjoyment. And this is the point of Yukta Vairagya. It's for Krishna's pleasure. And that brings me to the next principle that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura is known for. I'm trying to present 3 principles that we can take with us today, something practical. So the first one is Yukta Vairagya, and that means in the spirit of serving Krishna, we can accept things, anything, any paraphernalia in the universe, and especially we can do it when we're spreading the Krishna consciousness movement, because that's a great endeavor that requires using all kinds of resources to reach out to people and connect with them on their level. It takes a lot of consideration, and in the process of doing that, anything that's used becomes spiritualized. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad-Gita, just to back up some of these things a little more, Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir Brahmagnau Brahmanohutam Brahmaiva Karma Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir Brahmagnau Brahmanohutam Brahmaiva Tena Gantavyam Brahma Karma Samadhina. I still blew it, I'm doing it again. Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir Brahmagnau Brahmanohutam Brahmaiva Tena Gantavyam Brahma Karma Samadhina. Thank you. So this verse, Krishna says that whatever gross material thing, so-called, that you extend in the spirit that Maharaj was expressing, not for your own sense gratification, but for Krishna's glorification, for his sense gratification, to glorify him, that becomes spiritualized. And the example Prabhupada gave frequently was an iron rod. If you put an iron rod into fire and you leave it long enough, it becomes fire. It's a transformable element, iron. And similarly, everything, according to the verse I just quoted, Prabhupada said that matter is only spirit covered over, and it becomes spiritualized again when it's utilized. So this is one of the main principles of our Krishna consciousness movement. It came from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura. He brought in the sannyasi clothes. He gave sannyas to devotees. That wasn't done before Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura for devotees in the Gaudiya Sampradaya. They would put on white and emulate the dress of the Goswamis, the 6 Goswamis, that is, of Vrindavan, Paramahamsa dress. But he made a couple of points about that. One is that he wanted to distinguish himself from the previous kinds of devotees who had taken on that dress and not held up the principles of Krishna consciousness. He also wanted to show, by giving sannyas, also by giving the Brahman's thread. There's two separate things actually. When he gave initiation, you give a Brahman's thread. And that was something that was the opposite of what was done before. In other words, when people received the Gayatri mantra or the Vaishnava mantras, they would give up their Brahman's thread that all of you know who live in India you get as a young boy from your father. But to show that Vaishnavism is transcendental, or that they're no longer involved in the Varnashrama, then the Vaishnavas would not use the Brahman's thread. However, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati reintroduced it and said that actually this is proof that when you become a devotee, then you're automatically a Brahmin. This is the process. Aho bata shra pachato garyadya jiva grain vartate nama tubhyam te pusta paste juhuvusasna arya brahmanachar nama grananti ete. Devahuti says, oh, how glorious it is that if somebody's chanting Hare Krishna, then they become qualified as a Brahmin. So that, in other words, their prarabdha karma changes. So to illustrate that to the world, he gave the Brahman's thread, and he also gave the sannyas order, and he said that we're taking us a step below the Paramahamsa level to show that our subordination to the Goswamis. We don't think that we've risen to that level. We keep ourselves in Trinadapi Sunichena. This was an adjustment that he made, and this could be is under the category of Yukta Vairagya, of utilizing all types of social perception and the way the devotees are dressed. This is engineering specifically to expand the Krishna consciousness movement. You can see how this idea was in the heart of our Srila Prabhupada around mid-70s. Some of the devotees had gone to the Salvation Army. Maybe you don't know what that is, but people give away all their old stuff and they resell it and supposedly use the money for charity. And so a whole traveling party of devotees had gone to the Salvation Army and had traded in their dhotis, not to the Salvation Army, I think they left them home, but they just put on Western clothes. And then they found that they were able to infiltrate places like musical concerts that they hadn't been able to infiltrate before, because when they'd walk in with their dhotis on, then it's easy to spot. And people, they would be asked to leave. But then this party went in and they did more book distribution than they had done before. Some of the, at least one leader in the Krishna conscious movement had vehemently complained to Srila Prabhupada, saying that there's a group of devotees who are now reverting to hippiedom. You know what that is? You know what a hippie is, right? Hippiedom is just a noun. It just means that you entered back into the realm of the hippies because you put on Western clothes. So then Srila Prabhupada gave an edict. He said, stop it, you can't wear these clothes. But then someone wrote back to Prabhupada and said, actually, Prabhupada, the devotees are doing this just for Sankirtan. It's Yukta Vairagya, and they're doing bigger than they did before. Bigger means they were distributing more books. So then Prabhupada wrote back. Not only did he write back and say it was okay, but he also added a purport into his Bhagavatam, or Chaitanya Charitamrita, where he specifically says that devotees can wear any dress needed to help spread the Krishna conscious movement. Yukta Vairagya? Multiple choice is this? Still? Havi Prabhu, Yukta Vairagya?
Yes.
Havi Prabhu, sitting right over here, for the record, he said yes. So, this is a principle of Yukta Vairagya is handed to us by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, who through Srila Prabhupada, emulated with the same mood for the sake of touching people all over the world with Krishna consciousness. Innovate, use technology, adjust the situation externally so that you can make it available and that people can feel accommodated. Does that make sense to everybody, or anybody would like to debate the point? Nobody wants to fight. All right. Okay, then another principle. Prabhu wants to fight. Okay, give him the mic. No.
Srila Prabhupada, he said that if I had chanted Hare Krishna under a tree, no one would come. Then he wants first class prasad, first class dressing deities, first class kirtan. And like this, he could spread in the west when you go in the west, for instance, first class prasadam is there. And he spread the movement, distributed Vairagya.
Very well said. Hare Krishna. Come on, a little more. Give me a little love. A second principle, because at some point there will be revolt if we take too long. But second principle is that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta gave this important philosophical point. It's a principle of the seer and the seen. So there's drashta and drishya. So drashta means the seer, the one who sees, and drishya means the one who's seen. And there's a saying in English, in America, when people say, good to see you. Do you say that here in India? It's good to see you? Okay, 3 or 4 people know only. But sometimes people say, it's good to see you, and then the other person says, it's good to be seen. It's good to be seen by you. This is the mood. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura said, we're not drashta, we're not the seers. In fact, if you read in the Bhagavatam, you find how until the universal form starts seeing, and then the parts and parcels don't see. We're all connected. Mamai Vamsha Jiva Loke Jiva Bhutta Sanatana. So we don't exist without Krishna. We're part and parcel of Krishna. We're maintained by Him. Nitya Nityanam, Chaitanas Chaitananam, Eko Bahunam Yovidhati Kaman. Everything, every breath we take is facilitated by Krishna. So the mood of the materialistic person who's moving about the material world is that I'm the enjoyer of everything I see. And it's for my enjoyment. I'm seeing it, and I'm objectifying it, and I'm looking at it for my own pleasure. It's mine. There's a big difference between, for instance, a car and my car. Anybody here have a car? Nobody. No yukta vairagya going on in here, I'll tell you. You guys, see me afterwards, I know a few good car dealers. It's a bad time for it though, because the supply is down because of the supply chain. So, if you hear a car getting hit outside, which if you listen carefully right now, you'd probably hear it right out here on the road. If your car is parked out there, it's your car, you're going to probably get up from the class and walk out with perspiration coming down your face. And then when you look out and see it wasn't your car, it was Maharaj's car, then you won't feel so bad because it's not your car, it's not my car. So we objectify everything in the material world. Dhyayato vishayam pumsam sangasteshu vijayate. I'm looking at everything and I'm contemplating. What is contemplation? This is for my enjoyment. I'm seeing it as an object of enjoyment. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, this must be switched. You have to become the seen, not the seer. Krishna is the seer, we're the seen. And one of the ways he demonstrated this was, and of course it wasn't just a demonstration, it's the way he felt. When he'd come in to see the deity, sometimes he didn't wear his glasses. And when the disciples would try to give him his glasses, he said, no, I'm not here to gaze upon the deity, I'm here for them to see me. He was showing this point. What's more, sometimes he would stand at the back of the temple under the Garuda Stamba, way in the back. And his reasoning that he explained was, when Krishna looks, he'll see his great devotee, Garuda, and then he'll see me standing underneath. And then I'll be seen. So here's the takeaway, if I may. It's an easy one, but it's something you can keep in your pocket, or maybe even short enough that you could make it as a tattoo on your arm and keep this one with you. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura, according to our Srila Prabhupada, said that don't try to see God. Try to work and act in such a way that He will see you, or that He'll want to see you. I mean, Krishna sees everything and everybody, but Mahavishnu is half asleep on the causal ocean because living entities in the material world are sort of boring because they're self-absorbed. But if you want to attract the attention of Krishna and be seen by Him, then there's a way to work and act in the world. Atashi Krishna namadi nabhaved grayam indriye sevan mukhi jivado swayameva spratyada. One of Prabhupada's most frequently quoted verses from the Padma Purana, is it? Prabhu? Padma. In which we're told that we can't see God with our eyes, but if we take a service attitude and we try to serve Him, especially beginning with our tongue by chanting Hare Krishna, then He'll be pleased to come and see us, or to reveal Himself to us. So this is one of the main principles that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura taught. And it's compact in this one sentence, and it's something that I remember a lot. Well, not that much, because I don't remember many Krishna conscious things that much, but it is something that I bring out whenever I need it for inspiration. Have you ever felt sort of off balance and you need something to get you started again in your Krishna consciousness? Have you ever felt morose? Good, you're making me feel better now, because I feel like that a lot. So here, one of the ways is to remember, don't try to see Krishna, but try to act in such a way that He'll want to see you. So then I'm properly situated immediately. That reminds me of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's song when he says, Ajiv Krishna das e bishwas korleto atukunai. Duk means when the axle is out of alignment with the wheel, and then there's friction, sparks, and even fire. Do you have any friction, sparks, or fire in your life? That's Duke. So how do you fix that? By this principle that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura taught, which is align yourself in service. Just ask this question, how can I be of service? Do you want to ask that? Actually, better yet, turn to the person next to you and ask, how can I be of service? Here you go. Work with me, people. Turn to the person next to you and ask, how can I be of service? Ask. Come on, be more enthusiastic. Havi, did you ask somebody? So how do you feel now? Unhappy? Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, if you want to immediately be free from duk, then align yourself with this mood. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura said, don't be the enjoyer, be the servant. Be the drishya, the one who's seen doing service. Don't be drashta, the one who is thinking, how can I be the enjoyer and controller? How many principles do we have so far? I have one more to go. I think two. Two principles that you can take home in your pocket, and the third one is called the Brihat Madanga. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura called the printing press the Brihat Madanga. He saw a new technology, this printing press, previously, and I actually have one at home, a scroll written on palm leaves. What requires to write a book in palm leaf is that you have to have a metal stylus, and you have to press it on the leaf itself to make a mark. And after you've written on one palm leaf and filled it up, you put it in the sun, and it changes the color where you pressed down the metal stylus, and then you get the words. So it takes a while to write these things. But then, of course, through the technological revolution that we've had in the world, the printing press came out. First with a fellow named Gutenberg, who figured out how to make a press to make Bibles. And then the Royal Bible Society, after that, improved upon it. The original impetus was to get the word out to the world about the teachings of Lord Jesus Christ. So they wanted everyone to have Bibles. Martin Luther also used it in his revolutionary style of preaching, and he had some papers that he mass-produced and got out to the world. And there was a marked increase in the places that these went out of Christianity, people reading them. Books actually work. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said that was not lost on him. You'll notice that even scientific concepts like evolution. Are you familiar with evolution? Only 3 people? Have you heard of the theory of evolution? Yes. Okay, 6 people have heard of it. Actually, you've all heard of it. But how did you hear of it? It was written in a book. Darwin. Charles Darwin. He wrote a book. You all have it, right? Origin of the Species. You don't have it, probably, but you know the ideas because they went all over the world from the book. It's been translated in many languages. And so Srila Bhaktisiddhanta saw this, and he said that the Gaudiya literature should go all over the world, so he was not timid about picking up technology. And when we went to the Gaudiya Math in Calcutta a few years ago with our yatra, best yatra we ever had going to Calcutta, that's my favorite place on the planet, then we went to the Gaudiya Math, and I didn't see any printing press. I thought I would see it because it's known that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, at least I knew, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura had put the printing press just next to the deities in the Bug Bazaar temple to emphasize their transcendental nature. Correct? So when we went there, I saw the deities, but I didn't see any printing press. And that's when I started my inquiry around the Math, saying, where's the printing press? And there were some meetings amongst some of the brahmacharis there. The sannyasi came out, and they said, who are you anyway? And, and I told them that I'm an interested party, and that when they were convinced, they said, we'll show you something. So they took a few of us up to their museum that they were building. It's probably open now, I'm sure. And on the top floor, we went into a room that was half finished. They were constructing a museum there. But in the middle of the room, there was a printing press that had belonged to, not just belonged to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta and his Math, but he had personally ordered it. And of course, I bowed down to that printing press because of the principle of Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir. It's a transcendental implement. And then I walked around the other side of it, and I looked, and on the side of the printing press, it said Cleveland, Ohio. It was built in Cleveland, Ohio. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had shipped it over. He had shipped several of them. There was one of the presses that he used to daily produce literature that he would have his students go out and distribute in mass to people. And so he instilled, as all of us know very well, this principle in the heart of his disciple, Abhaycharan Aravinda, our Srila Prabhupada, that as he told him, as Srila Bhaktisiddhanta told him in Radhakund, when our Srila Prabhupada asked, how can I be of service? So many others are serving you directly, what can I do? I'm a grahasta, I have obligations. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta told him, if you ever get money, buy a boat. right? Get a yacht. If you ever get money, you should invest in a candy bar company. How am I doing? Is it multiple choice? If you ever get money, okay, only 3 people know this. Okay, let's try it again. If you ever get money, yeah, that was such a direct and very specific point. Now, when Srila Prabhupada came to America, he didn't establish any temples. What's the first thing he did when he got some money? And I just have to tell you, you're all young here. Back in the old days, even back before my days, I only joined the Krishna Consciousness Movement in 1973. Before that, there was no money. It was very difficult. The devotees had very, the prasadam was always nice by Krishna's arrangement, but there wasn't a lot of extra money just to buy cars, and that's why we're famous for having, from the old days, really old cars that fell apart. But when Prabhupada did get some money, the first place he bought was on Beacon Street in Boston. And the reason he bought it was because it was big enough, well, because it was a place, and because he could put the printing press there. And in fact, he brought our architect, what's his name? Narayan Prabhu. Brought him there to reinforce the floor of this old building so that Prabhupada could move a printing press in and use it to start printing books. Why? Because that's the first thing that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta told him, that if you ever get money, print books. So as Prabhupada came to America, he got some money. What's the first thing he did? He got a printing press to print books. Not only that, he sent his disciples into New York City to apprentice to learn how to do the printing. There were about 8 of them, and they went into the trades to learn how to do the printing. So this was one of the principles of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura, and you'll hear the echo of that throughout Prabhupada's teachings and his purports everywhere, that he says, I always considered printing books and distributing them to the people more important than building temples. He said, of course, the temples came along, but they were all built really on money that came from our book distribution and outreach. This one, being an exception, Guru Kripa Prabhu and party in Japan had collected the money. Of course, they distributed back to Godhead magazines on the street while they were doing it. So this principle of the Brihat Madanga, and that is to continually increase the volume of the holy name, and that includes printing books and distributing them all over the world, because as Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura said, the Madanga and Kartal can be heard for a few blocks, whereas the book can go all around the world. And Srila Prabhupada emphasized this, also observing that if somebody bought a book, it would penetrate an institution or a home, whereas you couldn't bring the Harinam into somebody's house generally. People didn't invite us in that much. But he saw that the son and daughter of the US president had purchased a book in Washington, D.C., and one would assume they took it home, and there it is. No Harinam inside the White House, but you can send a book there. This came from the inspiration of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura. So all of us who are engaged in doing this book printing and distribution and thinking, how can we make it bigger? Brihat. That's in line with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura. He was very much against retiring and going off into solitude to just chant by oneself, because there's a mood of compassion that comes from our acharyas, and that is try to do good for others by spreading the Krishna consciousness movement. So that's the third principle, the Brihat Madanga. So 3 things we talked about, 3 principles. One is Yukta Vairagya. And this is the sutra that goes with it, and that is the whole universe is paraphernalia to be used in Krishna's service, not for our personal enjoyment. Second is be the seen, not the seer. And the sutra is that don't try to see God, but try to act in such a way that He'll want to see you. And now the third one we can't remember because it's been so long ago since we talked about it. I can't remember what it was. Could you? Oh, Brihat Madanga, yeah. The Brihat Madanga is what really moves our devotees all over the world because it's a really practical service. You can count how many books are in a box, and then when you get home, you can count how many are left. And you can increase. And doing that, seeing how to make it bigger, go wider, this is the principle of the Brihat Madanga, and it's a good idea. It's a really good idea, and it follows in the footsteps directly of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura. You can be sure that if you follow these three principles and observe them carefully in your life, not only will you be following the parampara through Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura, but you'll also be joyful, happy, you'll have no problems to speak of, and you'll also become extremely advanced in Krishna consciousness. Om Tat Sat. Yeah, Hare Krishna. Prabhu, do we have time for a few questions since we're fasting till death? Okay. Okay, let's have some discussion, unless you're too compressed to talk. You've been sitting here for 2 hours. Oh, Deena Bandhu Prabhu, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Haribol.
I think I have a life member, a very dear friend of Krishna consciousness in Dubai. He's convinced the Christians are giving Bibles away free, the Muslims are giving Qurans away free. We should be giving away Bhagavad-Gitas. We're building buildings all over the world, but we should be giving Bhagavad-Gitas away for free. I have a program we have a program with him in Mayapur. And one of the devotees is taking free Gitas that this man donates and gives them to the villagers around the temple. And he sends videos, and they're so happy. And he has a headache trying to get BBT to give discount for this. But we have so much money, we build all these big temples, we should be flooding the world with Bhagavad-Gitas as it is. Hare Krishna.
Get Bhima on the phone. Who has a cell phone? Get Bhima Prabhu on the phone right now. I know this gentleman, I talked to him also. And I tried to broker a deal. So far it hasn't come through. Because there were, anyway.
It's also important,
yes,
the fact that whoever is in the street contributing in any way possible, it's going to be benefited. And I still recall your story about you being in the street, finding one person who had only a lighter. Would you take just 30 seconds to...
Well, lightning struck twice because I was in San Francisco about 5-6 years ago for Black Friday. You know what that is? That's good you don't know. It's the biggest shopping day of the year in America. So we were out distributing books on the street, and I met this young couple who were sort of footloose and fancy-free. Means they're kind of like hippies. So then they were very interested in the book. In fact, they sat down on the sidewalk to look at it as I was showing them. This is what hippies do. And so they were looking, they said it was great, and I mentioned the donation. Now, when I ask for a donation, I always say it like this. I say, we don't sell it like in a bookstore. We only take a donation. We don't need the money. The only reason we ask is when you give something in return for spiritual knowledge, it connects you to the previous teachers who have passed it down painstakingly over many generations and allows you to enter deeply within the knowledge. So I told them that, and they appreciated it, as most people do. And they said, well, we don't have anything except for, and they went through their pockets, and they pulled out a cigarette lighter, and I said, I'll take it. Because which principle is that? Yeah, it could be Briyat Mridanga also. So, yes, Prabhu?
Prabhupada says, well, we distribute free books also. We have subsidized universities.
No, I'm not against free books. I'll speak up for free books too in a minute, but let me finish this one. So I accepted the lighter and I gave him a Bhagavad-Gita for the lighter. And somebody came up to me about an hour later and they said, can we get the lighter back? Because they realized after a while that they kind of needed it to, to smoke whatever they were smoking. And I took that lighter home and I cleaned it as well as anybody can clean anything in this world. And I used it for many years till that lighter ran out for my puja. And every morning when I would light the lighter, I would think, as Tavi Prabhu was pointing out, this person is getting some benefit from this. And the same thing happened just recently when we were in Wales. And there were about 10 devotees standing there, and the guy was smoking a cigarette on a break. And lightning struck twice. I took his lighter from him. And for a minute he wanted it back, but I convinced him that it was probably better if we use it in the temple than for his smelly cigarettes. And then he agreed. And so we can take things from people so that they'll appreciate it more deeply, was your point, right? Havi Prabhu? And Maharaj, I'm sorry I cut you off, but I just wanted to finish that lighter story.
Prabhupada says, if we give books for free, they will not value it. And he gave an example, it's like if you were giving out mangoes, and they will say, this is very sweet mango, but they will not take it. But if you ask a little bit of donation, they will value it. And they will say, this must be sweet, so let me buy it. We also give free books. Like to schools, like we have Surabi Palayantam Swami, he donated like 700 sets of Srimad Bhagavatams. And we were distributing books to all the schools and universities around here. So if you give something for free, they will not really value it that much. So we're just asking very minimal.
Yeah, this is a, should I keep going? Pancha Yoga? Yeah. Okay, so this principle, I guess let's discuss it for a minute, because money is it's a token. It's a way of exchange that's socially accepted. And I have a piece of paper that says that somebody somewhere is good for this. I'm going to back it up. May or may not be true at a certain point. So that's an exchange, and it's something people value. So as an example, sometimes if I'm talking to somebody and they show an interest, even for a minute or two or less, and then they don't have the wherewithal to give something in return, like money, then I'll ask if they want to read the book, and they'll say yes. And then they may even complain and say, well, I can't give anything for it, and so how can I take this? That happens a lot. And I reply that you just paid attention. And your time is more valuable than money anyway. Money just represents that you took some time somewhere else. So you just gave your time here. Point was that, and is, that when we're careful about the context and how people get them, and we can develop context. For instance, at the Los Angeles Rath Yatra, we give out little packets with books in it. And it's a different context because people are enamored of the Rath Yatra. They're seeing all the devotees dancing and singing, and then when they get a packet, they feel they've got something really valuable that connects to this experience they had at the Rath Yatra. So generally they keep it. But does everybody keep the books? No. And back in 1974, we asked Prabhupada, at least we, meaning the Sankirtan devotees, what to do about people who bought books and then left them or threw them away. Because I can tell you, up until 1977, we insisted that everybody give something, or at least $5 for a big book. But then, sometimes after that, Panchagoda knows, Prabhu knows, they would just leave them, for instance, in airports, and we'd buy back maybe 5% of the books we sold. So we told Prabhupada, sometimes people are throwing away the books after they buy it. And Prabhupada said, what would he expect? In Kali Yuga, people throw away their own babies. So they don't understand the value of something. They used to steal books too. It was a sport people had because we were just kids and we were trying to sell books, and they thought that they would pull a fast one on us, grab the book out of our hand, or as soon as we show it to them, they'd just claim it as theirs and then walk away. And we complained to Prabhupada about that too. And Prabhupada said 2 words, lucky thief. So I think that, with a little engineering and intelligence, we want to invite people to give large or small sums of money, see me afterwards, for increasing book distribution. And it's becoming a bigger and bigger avenue, people sponsoring books and then having devotees go out and place them in hotels, motels, hospitals, and things like that, and people are reading them. I'll give you one more example. During the pandemic, the thick of the pandemic in California, in Silicon Valley, we were doing a lot of books online, but this really got into a book distribution seminar. I don't think Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura would mind. But one of the ways that we did it was we made a little door hanger pack with some cookies and a Bhagavad-Gita and a few other books, and we'd go hang them on doors because nobody was making contact physically at that time. No vaccine, everyone inside, nobody making contact. So several people called us and said, you can't do that. Just hang, what a useless activity, hanging books on doorknobs. But we have pictures to prove it, physical evidence. We got a cascade of letters and cards coming back to us, thanking us for reaching out to them during the pandemic and giving them prasadam and books. They didn't know they just cookies and books. And we also made devotees from those door hangers. We have the people to prove it. They came directly from the door hangers. So, there are certain principles we follow to guide us, but we always have to look and see how to adjust them so we can give the most mercy to the most people. We don't want to be careless or nonchalant about giving the books out, that's for sure. But we do have to be flexible as possible. We'll take just 2 more. Yes, Prabhu?
Now the technology is...
Speaking of technology, we have a mic for you down here. This is Yukta Vairagya at its finest. Hare Krishna.
Prabhu, nowadays the technology is changing. So whether we should still stick to the printing books or some other means to be...
No, we should use everything. In fact, in my wallet, back in my room, I have a couple of cards that have a little code on it. And if you give the card to somebody, they're empowered to just use the code, and then they have a digital book. And we did that also during the pandemic, because digital books were not that utilized because we're so consumed with paper books, which is good. But we also got together with the BBT and did extensive reorganizing of the digital library, especially for America, because there's particulars involved, especially Amazon and the bigger organizations that make it virtually impossible to go around. In any case, we were able to then very successfully over the phone sell lots of of digital books. There's also audio books coming out. So ISKCON Bharati Maharaj just completed the entire Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita in audio, and that's going to be published soon by the BBT. I will add a caveat, and that is worldwide, paper books are holding their own. About 15 years ago, people thought, or industry, those interested in the printing industry thought that what would happen would be that the digital industry would outpace the paper printing, because they just thought, well, it's a trend, that why wouldn't people just take it digitally and it'll just keep growing. But as it turns out, there's an aesthetic about books, paper books, that people appreciate, and they're not giving them up. In fact, they're more than holding their own. That's a general statement, because there are pockets, like there are young people that don't read at all. They just scroll like this, and they look at things for 10 seconds, a minute maximum, they move on, so they don't even know what a book is. So, yes, everything can be utilized wherever we can print it. It's, writing is just an abstraction of speaking. That's all it is. And so we're taking kirtan and we're writing it down, and then it's a delivery system, is what a book is, or a digital. So we're interested in the delivery, not in the package that it's in, particularly. Whatever works, we'll do it. What do you think? Would that match Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's mood? Whatever works, we'll do it. Let's ask Deena Bandhu Prabhu to make sure.
No, I was thinking the same thing.
He was thinking the same thing. Haribol.
It's like Maharaj said, this temple, we don't...
Wait, we want to hear what you have to say.
Like Maharaj said, this temple went through 3 revisions before it came out the way it is. Prabhu was going to make it like Radha Damodar, with rooms all around everywhere like that. And then he started, money started coming in. He said, so let's make it like this. And more money came in. He said, all right, let's make it like this. Make some other place for, everything else.
Nice.
A kitchen over here, go down over here, this all inside the temple, and he just changed. Prabhu's not carved in stone, he's really adjustable on certain points.
Innovation. Thank you, Prabhu. We had one more. Yes, Prabhu.
I was in Australia. Then one devotee said, Vaisesika Prabhu said, take books, 1 second, go into the car, turn, give books. And we did it. 2 devotees, we take books, we took some books, and we took the car, we went, and we distributed books, and we collected very, very nicely. Then we are an acharya. We had
I don't know what you said, but it sounded like I said, take some books, go out and distribute them. If that's what you said, then that's true. And I do think it's a good idea for everyone to follow in the footsteps of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, who Prabhupada told us was extremely pleased when even a so-called insignificant brahmachari in the mutt would go out and sell a 1 paisa paper, a written paper about Krishna consciousness. Then Srila Bhaktisiddhanta would take the time to glorify that person in front of everybody. He also told his sannyasis and muttbasis that every day they should go out and knock on at least 3 doors. And he said even if the people don't take, they'll still think, oh, there was some spiritual person here, and they'll get credit. And then he said, when you get denied or people object to what you're doing, or they even berate you for being a devotee or for distributing books, then he said, you get chid rakta, spiritual blood, for your chid sharira, your spiritual body. In other words, while you're in this world, take full advantage of it, because you only have a few years. Take it from me, it goes by fast. And you get a little opportunity, a window of opportunity to do this. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta says you get spiritual blood in your spiritual body by going out and having people not appreciate you. So that kind of makes it a little easier, right? Say yes.
Yes.
Yeah, makes it easier. Okay? Any last thing, or do you want to just... Yes.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
When we were discussing about how books will always be an attraction, I remember one line that you've written in one of your books where books are nothing but Krishna in form of paper and ink, which touched me a lot, and I kind of, when I share this thing when we go out on book distribution, it does appeal to them. So just wanted to share that.
Yeah, it's like a deity. It's where the eternal meets the temporal. You know, the deity is Krishna directly, but everybody knows the deity's made of marble. But Krishna now is manifest there. So in the Vaishnava Shastras that we're distributing, we're actually distributing deities to people. And they're full of spiritual idea seeds. And when those go out into society, they start to grow. And that's how ideologies, whether they're political, economic, or spiritual, get inculcated into society and people take them up. It's generally because of books. In fact, the entire America now, you can trace it back to the Revolution, and the Revolution was started, say historians, by a book written by Thomas Paine, still the highest selling book per capita of any other book in history, that everybody in the colonies, that's what America used to be called, the colonies, bought it and read it. And because of that book called Common Sense, amazing book, what a writer, if you ever want to read some good writing. He sold that book throughout the colonies, people bought it, and that's what made them strong enough to rise up and revolt. So for all of us, we want to be these dynamic spiritual warriors, just as Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura was, right?
Yes.
Is that what you want?
Yes.
Come on.
Yes.
I'm still a little, you know.
Yes.
Yeah. And so we can do that by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura's mercy, and we can cause the most damage to Kali Yuga, the most damage per capita by distributing books. Because once it goes out, it's the Briyat Madanga, it's there, and it lingers. Some of these books, the paper they're using, like Brahma Muhurta Prabhu in the North European BBT, he uses special paper. It's not only ecologically sound, but it also, it holds up, it can last as much as 300, 400 years. So just keep in mind that when you distribute one book, it can last for many generations. In fact, you may distribute the book, you may leave your body and take birth in the same family that you distribute the book in, so that when you get there, the book's already waiting for you and you didn't miss anything. So do it for yourself if you don't do it for anybody else. Okay, now we're just biding our time, but is there any last thing that you want to say? Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
I've been distributing books for the last 30 years.
Haribol. How do you feel?
I feel great.
Okay, you look great.
I've been hearing about you, and you are my role model. So I go out every day to distribute books in India here, but I have a little problem with my color. When people see my color, they provoke me, they say I'm Kalia, I'm a slave. So what should I do?
Well, generally we find that every circumstance has a key that can open it. And what I found, my experience is, oftentimes when there's some obstacle, seeming obstacle, it's the doorway to a new innovation that opens things up. And first thing to do is, to look for that key. What is the way to use it? Like comedians, when they come on stage, one of the ways they get the audience with them is they bring out the obvious. Like they'll say, or they'll talk about themselves, maybe in even disparaging ways. Like they'll say, you know, I'm a real loser, and I went to school, I dropped out, and everyone starts laughing because everyone appreciates self-deprecation. So my point is, whatever people perceive, if you go with it, and you augment that, and I don't have it right at the top of my head. I'd have to go out with you and we could talk about it. But I know that there's always a way to figure out what's the key to open it up. I'll give you an example of what I'm thinking about. Not in your particular case, but the general principle. And that is, when we do yatras down in Jagannath Puri. And so most people speak Oriyan or Bengali or Hindi. And we brought with us in the last yatra devotees from Japan and China and some from America. And very few of them spoke Hindi, Oriyan, or Bengali, what to speak of English. And we had a job to do, which was to distribute at least 5,000 books. And so let's say the Chinese had to do it. And so they could easily say, look, I'm Chinese, I know nothing about Bengali or Oriyan or Hindi, so let's not try. But as it turns out, there was a key, and it's actually easier to distribute a book when you don't speak their language. And the reason is that we use these language cards. It's a card that it says exactly, it's a sutra, it says exactly what you need to say to them. And when somebody who's Chinese walks up to you in Oriya and you don't speak the same language, and they hand you a book in your language and then hand you a card that says what it says, they know that you know that they know what it means. And therefore, there's no getting out of it. It's either yes or no. But if you knew a few words, they'd pretend like, I don't understand you. So it's better you don't know anything. And so that was a workaround. Workarounds bring turnarounds. And you just go with it and learn around it. So I've always found that if there's a trend happening, you try to lean into it and make it your asset rather than something that is delimiting. And I'll meditate on it more. Hare Krishna. Okay? We should end now, right? Because it's time. But I'd just like to point out and maybe reiterate that I think that the fact that this turned into, at the last third of the presentation, a book distribution seminar, I think that's appropriate. I didn't really intend to do that, but I think that it would please Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura, that all of you pleased him by that. What do you think?
Vaisesika,
yes, Prabhu.
I think we're going to arrange here for you to do another class, but you're here for some days, right?
Krishna willing.
Yes. So this is very inspirational all over the world. This is going on, the training and inspiration, and this is the mood of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, this is the mood of Srila Prabhupada, and this is everybody's mood now to spread Krishna consciousness. So Janardan has arranged for you to do
If I may just point something out.
Go ahead.
Panchagoda Prabhu is a great hero, actually. It means a hero of Prabhu. I remember one time, I was in the San Francisco airport behind a little booth distributing, and I saw him come barreling down the hallway because he's a formidable figure. And he had been in Los Angeles, and he had this determination just to go down there during the marathon. And he distributed like 100 big books a day. I mean, I'm just giving that as one small example, but he's been doing that for decades. And then coming here to Vrindavan and taking over the leadership of the temple, this is something that, I mean, it's not only in his spirit, but also because of his heroics on Sankirtan, it gives him this fortitude to handle this kind of project. It's a huge endeavor to be here all the time and to deal with meetings and all the other kind of everything else going sideways all at once. And only somebody who's completely integrated in Krishna consciousness could do that. So thank you, Panchagoda Prabhu, for holding space for all of us here in Vrindavan. That's it.